Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It's March 3rd, 2021, and this is episode 62, Allie. So kind of a funny joke here. This is actually take two. We just wrapped up the entire show and realized we never hit the record button. So we're going to give this thing a whirl again. And, we got a couple of unique sets of topics here. The first thing, Allie, we're going to talk a little bit about some updates around the Roundup Ready 2 Extend or XtendiMax dicamba application label. And it really affects the listing area here. And probably something we want to start out with just kind of prefacing this topic here just a little bit, Allie.
Yeah. So like we talked about, I think this is really important because this would be the fourth time in about 5 years that you as a farmer are going to face a new set of requirements to be able to spray dicamba over the top of your dicamba tolerant soybeans. So with any changes like that, always come a good point of making sure that we're reiterating what has changed, what remains the same, just to make sure that we do things right. I think one of the biggest things that has changes would be the buffers in general have gotten bigger. So the standard downwind buffer distance is going to be 240 feet. But outside of that, there's kind of a second buffer requirement, which is going to designate a 57-foot omnidirectional buffer combined with a 310-foot downwind buffer to protect endangered species. So this buffer is only going to be required for fields in counties that have been listed on EPA's specific list. So I think that's where we bring this back to which of our listeners does that directly affect here in Southeast Minnesota?
Yeah, so when we talk about these different requirements for endangered species, 3 counties in Southeast Minnesota got designated in this endangered species designation. And these 3 counties include Fillmore, Winona, and Olmsted County were the 3 in Southeast Minnesota that were designated as this. There were a couple counties in Northeast Iowa that were as well, but these are probably the 3 that we'll focus on here today, Allie. And you mentioned that buffer expands, and that is right on from the standard 240. It'll go to 310 plus this omnidirectional buffer of 57 feet. And what does that mean? So what that means that even if a sensitive crop is upwind, there's going to be a 57-foot omnidirectional buffer if a sensitive area is upwind or in a direction that's opposite of downwind, basically. So in some cases, if everything that's not downwind is sensitive, there'd be about a 57-foot buffer around the entire field and a 310-foot buffer if what was downwind was sensitive. So it definitely does make things a little bit more restrictive, Allie, compared to the standard buffer requirements.
Yeah, and with the standard, so if you have a non-dicamba tolerant soybeans, they're obviously a sensitive crop. So if those are downwind at any point in time, you can't make an application on that field regardless that particular day. You'd have to wait for that downwind to shift. But I did want to come back to the 57 omnidirectional buffer with these extended buffers in terms of crops that are considered sensitive. And corn is in that 57-foot buffer, correct?
That is correct. Basically, the only crop that's considered non-sensitive is dicamba tolerant soybeans. So if any other crop or dicamba tolerant cotton, which really isn't going to be a thing up here, but that would be the only thing that would, from a crop standpoint, that would be considered non-sensitive. So what that's saying, Allie, is even if corn is downwind, we have a 310-foot buffer even against corn, which now when we go into one of the counties that doesn't have the endangered species designation, they can spray right up to corn because it's not considered sensitive. So this is a very big change. Yeah, and basically the big thing is that corn is now considered a sensitive crop. So if you had a soybean field completely surrounded by corn, downwind, you would have to have 310-foot buffer, and it would be 57 feet buffer around the rest of the field, which to me, that's a bit of a game changer when we study out the changes to the rules in these endangered species counties.
Yeah, so a lot of different scenarios obviously here that you'll want to make sure you're running yourself through. But as we've talked, Josh, I think also important, and you can chime in here, it really is important to be in communication with your neighbors, specifically what soybean traits are they planting across their acres? Maybe what are some of these plans going to look like so that you can start preparing now, because obviously the stakes are going to remain a little bit high for making some of these applications, and we want to make sure that they get done right. For folks that are now, just understanding maybe what some of these changes can mean in terms of making these dicamba applications, any specific tips on what folks can hone in now to make sure that they clearly understand this moving forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and maybe a little disclaimer on our part, is before you make any dicamba applications, is to just really understand the label, not only for the state, but also down to the county level now, where we do have some counties that have different designations, especially the three we referenced of Fillmore, Olmsted, and Winona County. But also, if you got questions on this, reaching out to the proper people at Department of Ag, or reaching out to us or your crop protection providers. Communication, you made a great reference too, of just really understanding what's surrounding you. When you think about soybeans now, there's been a large uptick of enlist soybeans. The amount of straight Liberty Link soybeans has increased. There's a larger number of conventional soybeans out there too. So not every soybean field is going to be dicamba tolerant. And I think that's something that you mentioned that we really got to be sensitive of, is really communicating, and then also understanding the requirements, especially if you farm in Fillmore and Houston County, your rules will be different. And Allie, as we come on a break, we'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to have going on here this summer.
Welcome back, listeners. So Josh, I thought a really nice discussion in segment 1 on some updates around dicamba applications to Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans. But I think as we move into segment 2, just a nice opportunity to talk through what we have planned for the 2021 growing season. Obviously, some great weather that came across the area this Saturday, and I think that got a lot of folks really excited to start thinking spring and all that's to come throughout the growing season.
Yeah, and it's March, so I always I get anxious whenever it's March, in a good way. But as soon as the calendar turns and some warm sunshine like this, I really get anxious about, and maybe not anxious, excited about the upcoming season, but also know that we got to get a lot of prep work done. And Allie and our end of it, we've been working pretty hard, kind of taking a look at, from an agronomy standpoint, a Pioneer, what we're going to be doing this summer. And I think front and center, we're going to continue our replicated corn PKP effort. PKP stands for Product Knowledge Plots. A lot of our listeners have probably seen some of our results from that. That's really what powers our annual agronomy summary book. Not a lot of changes to this, but obviously some new hybrids. I think we're testing 3 new platforms, Allie, this year, all in the Chrome platform and PKP, which is exciting. Some new products there. And I think we're going to land around 70 locations. I just... Yesterday, I was working with Brian, and we pushed all the locations down to the reps so they can start positioning and assigning them. But I think that'll be exciting. And Allie, from a soybean standpoint, we actually got some big breaking news of what we're going to have going on in that arena.
Yeah, so all of our soybean product knowledge plots across southern Minnesota will be Enlist PKPs, which I think is really exciting. We're rapidly making a turnover to the Enlist technology here in southeast Minnesota, and I think along with that, always just brings along the opportunity to make sure that you're evaluating those products in field. Obviously, Enlist is here in a greater way, will be this growing season. But as we move in to looking even to 2022, we have some exciting new varieties that we will be able to take a look at in this year's PKPs across southeast Minnesota. So, sometimes corn gets the spotlight, but I think really as we focus on the summer, E3 is going to be a really exciting trait to explore even more in a greater capacity in 2021. So a lot of opportunities for you as the customer to see Enlist in field and really have it prove what it can do across your acres.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think Chrome and Enlist E3 is going to be fighting for the spotlight, but both extremely exciting things. And there'll be a lot of great things there in the soybean arena. And in the soybeans too, we're going to have a small seed treatment trial in the middle of every replicated PKP location. Southeast Minnesota is a big user of soybean seed treatment. And sometimes we get some questions on data and kind of what the side-by-side data look like. So we put that together, which that should get us, maybe 35 or 40 direct side-by-side locations from an untreated and treated standpoint, which will be great as well. From a UAV standpoint, Allie, we talked a little bit about, the drone deploy platform kind of merging in with our proprietary stand count stuff that we've been working on the last couple of years. And, anything you want to discuss there. And I think the other thing we should probably just remind people is that, our growers, if you have a UAV or have interest, we also have pushed it out where you could have access to purchase these tools and use them on your own farm as well.
Yeah, and we'd encourage you, if you go back to last week's show, we talked about more in depth what that can look like for you as the customer. But I think, Josh, you talked about the fact that obviously we utilize our UAVs a ton as an agronomy team here at Pioneer. We have one of the largest drone fleets, but our drone fleet is going to be expanding as more and more of our Pioneer sales reps are utilizing UAVs and all the same technologies that we're using. So plenty of opportunities if you're wanting to take a peek at that technology, whether by yourself or through one of us or Pioneer sales rep, we can certainly make that happen this growing season. So a lot of exciting things to come in the UAV arena side of things.
Yeah, and Allie, you're kind of the co-person that's heading up our summer intern, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about what our intern is going to be doing, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners will probably cross paths with her this summer.
Yeah, so new face you'll see this summer. Madeline will be our summer intern. She comes out of Rhinebeck, Iowa. She actually has some great experience working in seed corn production with Corteva and Pioneer, so some nice background there. We'll have her focused on showcasing some of the work that we're doing with some of the drones and UAVs this growing season, but you'll also see her in field just focusing on what are some of the Enlist hot topics going on with some of our training sites, Chrome, and she will be forward facing on your farms as a customer. So look forward to talking with her as we move this summer. But she is not the only face that folks can expect to see, Josh. We have another new face on the digital side of our business.
Yeah, and this is really exciting. We have hired a full-time Corteva employee that's going to help us with digital in Southeast Minnesota. His name is Sam Hess. We'll probably get him on the show here within the next couple episodes, and kind of so everyone can kind of get to hear from him, and he can kind of introduce himself and give us some background on what he's been up to and what his role is going to be. But I think it's going to be a great resource. And for some of our growers that got questions in digital or looking to make some improvements or changes to their digital on their own acres, I think he's going to be a great resource for everyone across the area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we end today's show, the final thing, you talked about, is Chrome or E3 going to win the spotlight this growing season? We actually have some potential demo sites specifically catered around Enlist, Josh, that we'll have more information on to come as we get that finalized for the growing season.
Yeah, I'm getting close. I'll have to make an announcement. I'm hoping to have that down in Harmony. So it's going to be right down there in an area, but stay tuned, and hopefully we'll launch that here in the next week or two. And that's a wrap for this week, everyone, and be sure to tune in next week.
You've been listening to Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060.
Recording.
If you've missed part of the show or want to hear more, check out the show page at kfilradio.com or with the 103.1 KFIL app. Stay connected with Allie and Josh on Twitter. It's at Allie GYs, WISE, and at Josh Schaffner to submit your questions for the show. Tune in next Wednesday for the next Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060.